Thank you for joining us for today's Here's to Your Health podcast. I'm Don Lintzman, your host. My guest on the podcast today is J.J. Johnson. J.J. is the president of our local Denison Rotary Club. And J.J., thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm pretty excited to be chatting with you. I know you've been doing this for a handful of years now, and glad I finally got the call.
I think we're finally getting better at it, too, to be honest. I went back and listened to some of the early ones and thought to myself, ooh, man, we could really improve. But I think we've gotten better. And let's talk just really briefly about the Denison Rotary Club. About 30 members, do lots of great things in the community, though.
Yeah, constantly, every single year is kind of pretty fun. I've already been Rotary president here for about 8 months now, and I've learned a ton. But what I like is that service above self. We do an auction every year. This last auction was our 30th year of doing the auction, and we've raised now over $1 million that we've been able to put back into the community. And, not just with that, this year we had just over $50,000 that we're able to kind of put back, a wellness center, and just a ton of other grants that we're just starting to kind of accept and actually kind of dole out the money to them, too.
So I'm sure people are asking themselves, why are we talking about Rotary on a Here's to Your Health podcast? But here's where the tie-in comes in. Our local Denison Rotary Club is a part of Rotary International, and Rotary International has a program called PolioPlus. So let's talk a little bit about what Rotary International is and what Rotary International does when it comes to trying to eradicate polio, not just in the United States, but around the world.
So Rotary International is a worldwide organization with individuals, clubs, and members that kind of all are able to put money together to keep on growing this. Like you kind of mentioned, the Denison Rotary Club has roughly 30 members. Rotary began in 1905, and Denison was formed in 1966. So we're in the 57th year of our existence. The connection between polio and Rotary International has to do with our PolioPlus program, which began in 1985 and joined the Global Polio Eradication Initiative back in 1988. The goal of PolioPlus is to eradicate the disease from the face of the earth, and Rotary has raised millions of dollars to do just that. And we have limited polio to only a few countries in the world, and now we're working on the last few countries to eliminate this. There's no cure for polio. Polio only can be prevented by immunization.
And what's really unfortunate is for all the young people who might be listening today, and especially for them, they don't know what polio is. For anybody who's my age and older, so my age is almost 65 and older, and even some of the people who are just a little bit younger than I am, we're pretty well aware of what polio is because we all had very traumatic experiences getting the polio vaccine when we were in grade school. Very, very different back then in the 60s than it is today.
You're telling me like giant gun?
Yeah, giant gun, stand in line, everybody's crying. Those are the teachers. The kids were crying too, for that matter. But it's traumatic. It was traumatic back in the day. Not nearly as bad now. You just come in and we give you a shot and it's fine. But maybe we should start by talking a little bit about what polio is so that everybody understands something more about that disease.
Which is a very good point, because I fall in that just below the age of the group that you're kind of talking about. So it's like I'm aware of polio. I've always kind of known about polio. I remember getting the vaccine, when I was little too. But polio is an illness caused by a virus that mainly affects the nerves in the spinal cord or the brainstem. And its most severe form, polio can lead to a person being unable to move certain limbs, also called paralysis. It can also lead to trouble breathing and sometimes death. Polio is caused by one of three types of a polio virus. It often spreads due to contact with infected feces. This often happens from poor hand washing. It can also happen from eating or drinking contaminated food or water. Polio spreads even from person to person through contact with the poop, often teeny, very small, invisible amounts of it. It can be infected and infect a person. It can also spread through sneezes, cough, droplets from an infected person. We all kind of know how easy that can happen, Don.
We learned that we were reminded of it with the coronavirus.
And there are three variations of the polio virus called wild polio virus type 1, 2, and 3. And the wild polio type 2 and 3 have been eradicated, no longer exist. And then wild polio type 1 only exists in a few parts of the world. And polio type 1 is most likely to cause paralysis.
My guest on the podcast today is J.J. Johnson. J.J. is president of the Denison Rotary Club, and we're talking about PolioPlus and Rotary International and their efforts to eradicate polio as a disease around the globe. One thing I think we think about is that polio would be a relatively recent phenomenon. We know that early in the 20th century, or the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, there was a fair amount of polio back then. So for us, and my dad had polio, he was not affected for the rest of his life by that necessarily, but there were a fair number of young people, because it is a young person's disease. If you're under the age of 21, you're more likely to contract polio. If you're over 21, your chances of contracting polio are a lot less. But we think about it as a relatively recent disease within the last 100 years, but that's really not true.
Yeah, you're right, because it did not begin to occur until the latter part of the 19th century, but evidence indicates that polio is an ancient disease, a well-known tablet from the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, 1570, 1342 BCE.
Which means before Christ.
Yeah.
Right? So this is like time. 4,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Man, amazing.
So, and now, you can kind of just tell exactly, how long that this has kind of been around.
Yeah, and, polio is one of those diseases like many others that kind of comes and goes. And, you see it for a while, then it kind of goes away, and then it comes back. And it's only until Rotary and PolioPlus really got rolling that we were able to begin eliminating that. JJ, one thing people might be interested in knowing is, what was the last case of polio in the United States?
So, as we talked about it, the length of this and stuff, polio was eliminated from the United States in 1979. But as you just kind of mentioned, that's what, trying to eliminate it and eradicate it and get it gone. However, a few occasions and cases have been identified in this country. During the fall of 2022, an unvaccinated man in Rockland County, New York, was paralyzed as a result of a polio infection. That just shows how difficult it is to eradicate polio for good, and we have to be vigilant about it.
Yeah, when I say vigilant, I think what we really mean there is people need to get the vaccination. I understand some people have an aversion to vaccinations. They're concerned about chemicals and drugs and so on and so forth. I would tell you, I would rather take a polio vaccination every day of the week than actually suffer through that disease. Not only can it paralyze you, it can kill you. And so I would just encourage everybody who can to get, who isn't already vaccinated, go get the vaccination, because nobody wants to see anybody else suffer from that. So knowing that vaccination is really the only way to prevent polio, do we really know how long that vaccine is effective?
That's, you kind of look at it, when we've done it, if you've never been vaccinated against polio, you do need to get the 3 doses of the polio vaccine. The first dose at any time. The second dose 1 to 3 months later after that first dose, and the third dose 6 to 12 months after the second. Again, like you mentioned, it's not known how long people can receive the polio vaccine that will be protected against polio, but they are most likely protected for many years after a completed series of vaccines.
And what's interesting is that once they introduced the polio vaccine, Jonas Saulk came up with that, and it was introduced in 1953. Once they introduced the vaccine, and as we said, mass vaccination events across the entire United States, in elementary schools, high schools, junior highs, across the entire United States. What's difficult to know about how long that vaccination is valid is the fact that we eradicated it in 1979. So you just don't know. I mean, hopefully we're all still immune to polio. And as long as we eradicate it, we won't ever have to worry about it again. It doesn't matter. But just keep in mind that usually it's over a number of years that the vaccine is a very provides that immunology.
And that's why Rotary's still been big with doing and trying to get this, just eradicated, so that we don't have to worry about it or question it. But again, that's very difficult to do.
My guest on the podcast today is J.J. Johnson. J.J. is president of the Denison Rotary Club, and we're talking about Rotary International and PolioPlus, an effort by the Rotary International in order to be able to eradicate polio as a disease from around the world. Now, we've mentioned that polio is down to just a few countries. In fact, polio is down to only 2 countries. And perhaps you can share with us where those countries are and how close we are to accomplishing the goal of eradicating polio.
As we mentioned, it's down to just only the wild polio virus type 1. And the 2 countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and wild polio virus cases have decreased by over 99% since 1988, from an estimated 350,000 cases in more than 125 endemic countries to 6 reported cases just in 21 there, Don.
So we've gone from 350,000 cases in 1988 down to 6 cases worldwide in 2021.
Yeah.
And it's in those 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And because wild polio virus type 2 was eradicated in 99 and type 3 was eradicated in 2020, then we're down to just wild polio virus type 1.
And a big part of it, it's tough. I mean, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the terrain, cultures, beliefs, and that's kind of what you're fighting right now, of trying to get it completely eradicated, getting even type 1 eradicated.
And I'm sure that there are people out there who are wondering why it takes so much money in order to be able to eradicate a disease. But the reality is, when you get down to the very end, it takes even more money when you get to very mountainous, rural countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan, where there are cultural, language, and other sorts of tribal issues. It's very difficult to get everybody vaccinated against polio. But we're in there. We're going to keep going as Rotary will until the very end. Anything else you want to add today, either about the Denison Rotary Club or about PolioPlus?
It's great to see. I mean, when you talk about PolioPlus, we kind of mentioned, last case back in 2022 in the United States area, but that's a great thing of Rotary. It's been helping it, constantly trying to eradicate this, and it's their mission to make sure that they keep on going until it is eradicated.
My guest on the podcast today has been J.J. Johnson. J.J. is president of the Denison Rotary Club and a member of Rotary International and the PolioPlus effort to eradicate polio around the world. If you'd like more information about that, or maybe you want to make a donation on behalf of PolioPlus, you can go to the Rotary International website at rotary.org. And they have a place out there where you can sign up to participate and help them with a monetary donation. And JJ, thank you for your time today.
Don, thank you.
I'm Don Lintzman, the host for the Here's to Your Health podcast. Have a great day.